Good afternoon, everyone. We're here today to talk about what makes a successful MDM policy. So today we're going to be covering the following topics. So planning your mobile device management story, understanding your mobile platforms, understanding your options for them mobile platforms, securing your management estate. How do we all wrap that all together? And then we will finish with a Q&A. So moving on, a bit about me. I am a technical consultant at PowerON Platforms, specializing in EMS now. Within that EMS stack, my main area that I do focus on is Intune. Very sort of geeky technical stuff that we do there. So I've been with PowerON Platforms just over a year, 7 years in IT. I have a background in mobile support, specifically Intune and Mobile IAM. 3 years in consulting, and as you can see, the area of Intune that I do specialise in is hybrid. So, as you can see, if you head over to news and blogs, you will frequently find me posting posts about Intune, how we can do some really quite clever things, and just really to help you guys get the most out of your Intune product. So before we begin, I'll probably just elaborate as to why we're looking to do this. So as I say, been with PowerON Platforms a while now. Now, when we're going out and we're visiting customers, it's becoming apparent that we go on site, people don't really understand the true depth to mobile device management. So it always comes across as, it to be a very small piece, and it's actually generally quite large. So like anything, if the planning or you don't really know what you want from the solution, it becomes very hard to just put something in. There are multiple options and avenues of what you can actually do with the solution depending on what your requirements are. So it's very important to, when you go out and you actually look to adopt an MDM solution such as Intune, you have a good idea as to what you actually aim to do. What are your requirements? Are we looking to bring your own device? Are we looking to just have corporate devices? What's the look and the feel? What look and feel are we going for? And also the organisation of the policies. It's very, very, very easy to get overwhelmed by putting policies in here and there. And the key is it's planning. So once you've got your planning and it's simple, things will work very nicely. It's very easy to get to over confuse things while we're trying to put a policy in here and a policy there. So just try and keep things simple as you can. So moving on to where we are today, so planning your mobile device management story. So what I do like to say is when I speak to businesses is a lot of businesses actually go, they tell their end users, we're looking to lock your phones down. Now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of backlash from a user. A user doesn't like to know that they're actually being spied on. So whilst ultimately the business goal is to, protect the company's data, we can swing this, in such a way as to tell the user that it is to make them or is to allow them to work smarter. So MDM isn't just about locking a phone down. It's also about automating enrollment of the tools that allow them to actually do their job. So what we'll see later on in the presentation is that we can push down access to corporate resources. We can automate them getting their email. And we can give them their apps. So I always like to say MDM should be seen as a way to automate, streamline, and end users access to the tools they require for their job, giving them the flexibility to be productive on the move while ensuring business data is protected. So we're taking away the sort of the saying is, we need to lock your phones down and swinging it with, we're doing this to actually help you and to make you get up and running to do your job a lot quicker, which it tends to work a lot better. So moving on then. Now, before I get started on this, the main part, or the main thing to know, as you know, just elaborating to what I said earlier, it really is about planning. So, you know, if we take a step back a second and sort of the things that you should be thinking even before adopting, you know, your MDM solution is, what are we going to support? Is it iOS? Is it Android? Now, you're probably thinking, hold on a second, Windows phones. Now, due to the current state of Windows phones, I haven't actually included them, just because, as I'm sure you're all aware, these will start to become less frequent out in the wild. So, you know, once we've chose our platform, you know, how are we going to allow the users to enroll? Is this going to be bring your own device? Is it corporate owned, or is it a mixture of the two? So we really need to start to think about what we're doing before we then implement it. So the two platforms in question then, iOS and Android, as I say, it's very key to understanding what they can actually do and how they work. So I'll mention it later on in this slide, but what and not a lot of businesses that we visit, I don't think, understand, is that the MDM functionality that you see is not really governed by you know, the likes of AirWatch and Intune. They're actually it's the operating system itself that actually harnesses what MDM functionality you can use. So if we was to look at iOS, for example, iOS has a lot richer MDM functionality than the likes of Android. And that's purely because Apple have written that code in. So if you've had the opportunity to, you know, try out the likes of AirWatch, MobileIron and Intune, and really have a look on the lockdown policies, actually have a look at what they've got on offer. They are very simple, or sorry, they are very similar. And that is purely because the same functionality is available. It really does come down to what the operating system supports or has available to be managed. So on that part then, you know, if you have a requirement, for example, to trying to think of an example here, to prevent Wi-Fi networks being connected to, then it's important to understand, you know, if that's a business requirement, can Android actually do that for you? You know, or can iOS do that for you? So as I say, it's very important to understand, can the platform itself do it for you? It may be available in the MDM solution, but if the platform can't do it, you're not going to be able to meet your requirements. So iOS and Android, as you can see, we have two methods of enrollment for each. So we have, on iOS, we have supervised devices and we have unsupervised devices. For Android, we have Android for work, and then we have traditional Android policies. I'm going to talk a bit about, just delve a bit further into the iOS stage. So what is an unsupervised device? Well, essentially it is bring your own device. So if you take a phone out of the box and you go to enroll it, that is considered bring your own device, which is really, really key, is a really, really key thing to know, because as we'll see on the next slide, a lot of policies that you will apply will not work. So we've had a lot of businesses come to us and say, hey, we've pushed this setting to this iOS device, but it's ignoring the setting, and this is purely because the device is unsupervised. So as you can see here, supervised provides an enhanced set of corporate restrictions. While these devices can be targeted to an unsupervised device, they will be ignored. So if a device is not supervised, the policy will not apply. So moving on then, as I was saying, there are various settings on here which I'm sure I'll give you a second to just quickly read, that as a business you would most certainly want to control. You know, as an example, prevent arrays or prevent MDM unenrollment. So whilst, yes, MDM enrollment, you know, if I was to take my business phone here and I was to unenroll from MDM, the MDM solution, I would lose all of my corporate access, including all of my corporate data, to an extent. That said, you know, the business owns the phone, so you would potentially lose that phone. But by having the device in unsupervised mode, the user can unenroll. So other things that we won't be able to prevent, actually providing a whitelist, so to prevent the users from installing certain apps, a global HTTP proxy, and web content filter. So maybe you have a requirement to push all of your iOS devices through a proxy. If the device is not supervised, you will not be able to do it. And as you can see down here, we also have the MDM functionalities, which have come out in 9.3, which give us the ability to locate, track, and ring. So if any of you are currently using the Intune standalone portal at the moment, you will see that these have just appeared. So they do work. So if you are feeling brave, they are still in test. So yeah, as I say, if you are feeling brave, you can go and try them out. They do work, and they do have a very, very nice feel. But as I say, these are supervised features, and obviously we cannot control iOS updates. Also, so Android then. Android as a platform, if I'm completely honest with you, is the weaker of the two platforms. So if any of you are currently looking at Intune, or specifically Intune Hybrid, so Intune with SCCM, you will notice there isn't really a lot of policies for Android compared to iOS. As I say, this comes back to the part that there isn't a lot in the operating system that can be harnessed because Google actually haven't written the code in. So Android, we have a minimum set of configuration settings and MAM settings to control usability on the device. And then we have Android for Work. So Android for Work then, big buzzword at the moment. Essentially what it is it's sandboxing of corporate apps. So business data in business apps will be segregated to a different section of the device, and personal apps will be kept separate. So business data is separated in a work profile and protected device wide on work managed device. IT can apply data leakage prevention policies, and we also have work apps that can be deployed as automatic from the Google Play Store. So a key thing obviously about Android when looking at the platform as a whole is that the store by default does not get vetted for any malicious code, unlike iOS. So another thing to consider when looking at Android as a platform would be, you know, how are we going to protect our users from installing a mobile device virus? So it's another thing to think of. Now, as I say, the App Store on Android does not do it. If you are using the Android for Work, it is deployed via the Google Play Store, so you do have the ability to almost pick and choose what your users will be allowed to install. Once we've once we've took that all on board and we know what we're looking for, we know that, for example, iOS is going to meet our requirements of being able to stop the user connecting to the Wi-Fi. The next thing to think about is how we're going to even allow our users to enroll. So if we're purely just going to be doing corporate owned devices, the option that I would probably recommend is to pre-stage the IMEIs and enroll in the MDM solution. So whilst this is not a requirement, have you ever actually looked at Intune? We have the ability, as you've probably seen, to pre-stage IMEIs. Now, you're all probably wondering why. What stops me from doing and just enrolling? What's the difference? Well, when we pre-stage the IMEI, what essentially happens is the device gets marked as company owned, and from that, what we're actually able to see is inventory of installed apps. So when you don't pre-stage the IMEI, or it's not marked as corporate, we don't get that rich inventory of what's on the device coming back. So I would recommend, if you are doing corporate-owned devices, whilst it may be a pain to pre-stage the RMIs. Now, there is also a benefit when we're also starting to look at the both sections. So you're looking at doing corporate-owned and personal-owned, but I'll hit that point in a moment. So personal-owned devices, how are we going to look to do that? Are we going to enroll the devices in the MDM solution, or are we not going to enroll it at all? So something that's new with Microsoft, it's been out a couple of months now, is the ability to protect the corporate data without actually protecting the device. So the way that this works is the data, or the application that's controlling where the data actually resides, is controlled instead of the actual whole device. So you may have heard of the term MAM. Same principle, but this is MAM without enrollment. So the device doesn't actually need to be enrolled. So the end user experience would be, you may not want to enforce a user to put a 6-digit PIN on a personal phone. You may not think that's needed. But what we can do is within the application itself. So if they was to go to Outlook, if we're using Outlook as our mail client, whilst they don't have to type a password on their personal phone anywhere else, when they go to access Outlook, they have to type a password, and they are subject to certain conditions such as cannot copy and paste corporate data, cannot screenshot the corporate data. And moving on to both. So maybe you're also looking to, are we going to enroll them both in the MDM solution, or are we going to use MAM without enrollment again? Now, what's interesting here, I've had a lot of customers, clients that have, they've come to me and I've said, okay, what are we looking to do? Are we going to be doing BYOD here? Are we going to be doing corporate? And as I say, when you do both of them, you do have two options. So it's important to note, actually. So if you was to ask me what I would recommend, I'd actually recommend that you enroll the corporate devices in the MDM solution and the personal devices with MAM without enrollment. Now, the reason why I actually say this is because MAM without enrollment works in a completely different way to MAM. So, mobile application management natively will actually put the controls or the restrictive policy around the whole application. So I'll talk you through a scenario here. We have one of our directors, for example, and they have their personal phone. Now, they're quite tech savvy, so they like to use Outlook as a native client. They pick up their Hotmail on that. So if we was to, adopt the approach of we will be enrolling all of the BYOD personal devices in the MDM solution, and we have a MAM policy, what would then happen is the corporate data that will also be placed within Outlook will be locked down. But because it's mobile application management, the user's personal data, so for example his Hotmail that he may have in the Outlook app as well as his corporate, they will all be locked down. So he won't then be able to manipulate his personal data in the way that he should. It's his own personal phone. So whilst it will work, it will be quite troublesome in the long run. So MAM without enrollment works a little bit different. So the application by default is not locked down. Restrictive policies are only applied when the corporate mailbox is added. Now, what this actually allows you to do is MAM without enrollment should really be seen as, I guess, mobile identity management, because what the ability, or what this actually gives us, is the ability for two identities within the same app to not be able to talk to each other. So whilst MAM with enrollment is actually, we cannot take any data out of that application, MAM without enrollment is clever enough to know, well, hold on a second, yes, we're in Outlook, but the data that you're actually grabbing is your own personal data. So I'm going to let you take that out. That's not a problem. So you can see within the application, it's a lot smarter. So the identities themselves, whilst they are still in the same app, cannot talk to each other. So we can't copy and paste data from a personal identity such as Hotmail to a corporate mailbox such as Exchange. So it's a lot smarter way of working. So moving on. Another thing that obviously we need to think about, which is another thing that we tend to not see a lot of businesses think about. So we've just spent a fair amount on Intune licenses and maybe consultancies coming in and implementing the solution. Now, as it stands, obviously, if we're looking at corporate devices, for example, or even you've chosen to, you've gone down the route where you want your personal devices enrolled as well. Now, whilst if the phones are done via the IT department, we can ensure that they are enrolled in MDM. What necessarily stops a corporate user wiping that phone and then bypassing the MDM solution, just manually adding their mail account, and then not being subject to any policies? And the same goes for what stops me picking up my own personal phone and enrolling it in the mail and picking up my corporate mail. So really, really big thing that every business is, or when I go on site, I'll always recommend it to be implemented. So in the Microsoft world, this is called Conditional Access. So as you can see, it's used to prevent access to corporate resources by assessment against 4 measures. So we have location. Where is the device? So is the device coming from a trusted network, such as an IP address that's trusted on your network? So maybe your corporate LAN. Is the device enrolled? So this would more apply to the likes of Intune. So how if you're just interested about securing your users from accessing mail and you don't want them to access them on their personal devices, the way that conditional access actually works with Exchange is that when the user tries to enroll, also tries to pick up their email, the device is checked to first see if that device is enrolled in Intune. If that device is not enrolled in Intune, that device is quarantined. So what we're doing here is we're ensuring that all corporate devices, or all devices that are accessing corporate data, are managed by Intune. But it doesn't stop there. So what we can also do is we can also say, whilst they also have to be managed by Intune, they have to also be subject to certain conditions. So this may be device cannot be jailbroken, must have an 8-digit PIN, the mail profile must have come from Intune. So that's what we mean when we're talking about device. So user, application, this is very much about ensuring that applications that you don't want to be installed on the device are not installed. So if that application is installed, we can prevent the user from getting access until that's removed. So as I say, the way that this works, it's checked, it's quarantined. If the user then actually remediates the issue, they are then given access again. And then we also have risk score. So in addition to that, one thing that's a really key piece, or it's a really hot topic right now, is threat protection. So it's really a common misconception at the moment that mobile devices can't get viruses, and that's completely incorrect. So as I highlighted earlier, it's very, very easy to pick up a virus on Android, and most people actually think that iOS devices cannot get a virus. That is not true, unfortunately. We wish. It's a lot harder, but it does happen. So mobile device management is one key to the puzzle, in my view. So it's about protecting the user from moving data off. It's about protecting the device if the device is lost. But how do we protect the user from a virus? Or how do we protect the user from a attack, a threat of some sort? Well, your mobile device management solution isn't going to do this for you, I'm afraid. So What we then have is threat protection. So we have third-party companies such as Lookout and Skycure. As you can see, they are used to prevent access to corporate resources by analysing the following. So these third-party companies here will look at these applications on the device that you've installed. Do we have malicious code? They will also look at monitor the network of the device. You know, are we seeing a man-in-the-middle attack? And followed by, you know, device-based threats. Is the device jailbroken? Is there something wrong that's going on? Now, how this plays into Intune, so as I say, the threat protection is a third-party piece, but it does work, it does integrate into Intune. They actually work together. So the best way to actually see this is see the threat protection piece is the identifying method of the threat, and the mobile device management solution is the way to remediate the threat. So say for example, if I was to take a device now, I was to install a malicious threat on that device. Now the device is still enrolled. What would happen is Lookout, one of the partners, would would pick up that I now have a threat on my device. It would notify Intune, and then that device then gets marked as non-compliant. At that point, all corporate access, or I'll rephrase that, all MAM-enabled apps get prevented access. So if we're using Outlook, for example, we're using Word, Excel, Skype for Business, all of those MAM-enabled apps, they will not be able to be accessed until that threat has been removed. So once that threat is removed, the process works backwards. So you know, I've removed the threat. Lookout polls Intune. Intune marks the device as compliant. Device is then able to access. So as you can see here, they work hand in hand, but solely having a mobile device management solution will not protect you from threats, unfortunately. So we've talked about security. We've talked about you know, how we're going to enroll these devices. What platforms are we going to use? So I would say that probably the most important for the end user, the functionality. You know, what functionality are we going to give the users, or how do we do it quicker? So I spoke earlier about the beauty of MDM being the fact that we can push things out, we can automate stuff. So if I was to give one of my users a phone without MDM, and what they would have to do is they would have to manually type in the mail details, or the mail server, what's the username, what's the password. Now we can push all of that out. So just to go through these then, streamline enrollment. So if you are using the Apple devices or iOS devices, we can completely streamline enrollment. So rather than the devices having to come back to IT, which is traditionally done, we can actually straight from the carrier. So if we was to go and buy a device from O2, rather than that have to come into IT have to set that phone up with the user, we can actually send that phone direct to the user, straight from the carrier. And the reason for this is that the enrollment becomes very, very simple with these programs. The device is turned on, and straight from the out-of-box wizard, the user is asked to provide their corporate credentials. It really is that simple. So straight out of the box, it's enrolled in mobile device management. The user cannot bypass this stage. From a security perspective, you're safe because it can only be used from someone within your business. Excuse me. There are also other benefits, such as it actually will supervise your device as well. So we talk about them rich MDM functionality. The deployment enrollment program or Apple configurator will do that for you also. So mobile application configuration. This is the ability to actually self-configure applications that are being sent down to devices. So this list is actually ever growing, so not every application will support this. It's dependent on who's writing the application, if they write in the code. But from a mobile device management perspective, we can send down an XML that contains key pairs, which are sent to the likes of Skype for Business, for example. If you don't push out or you don't publicize what your server is, you're going to have to tell your user, hey, your UPN or your SMTP address is your email, is your username, and here is what the server is. With mobile application configuration, we can just send that down. We can populate that for the user, and all we ask is that they then type the password in. So we can also look to push down line of business applications. So we're talking about making it very sleek for the user. There's no point in enrolling the device for the user, and then that be that, because we all know all of our users are going to want certain applications to do their job. Maybe they're in sales, maybe they require the Salesforce app. So with a mobile device management solution, we can push that down for them. As soon as they enroll, they receive the applications they need to do their job. We can also start to push down certificates. So certificates for VPN access, certificates for Wi-Fi's, or maybe moving on to the next point. We're looking to do single sign-on, or we're looking to secure, as I said, these our network access with certificate authentication. So we can also do that as well. So as it stands, if we do push down a mail profile in the likes of Intune, you probably all would have realized that the user is prompted again for their username and password whilst they have already typed it. That is because, obviously, unfortunately, Intune is not Exchange. So Exchange is purely, it's a different system to Intune. So where we can start to get a little bit clever is that when a user enrolls in Intune, we can send down a certificate. We can point it at the server, and then obviously the server will use the certificate. So the user will only ever have to type their password into Intune. And a big bugbear for companies, or I guess something that generates the most amount of calls, is password resets. So with Intune, we can actually, users can actually reset their own passwords. They can remotely wipe the device. They can reset their own handheld password. So there is a website that they can go to, which is portal.manage.microsoft. They can log in with their own credentials, and obviously from there they can reset their own password. And obviously, just jumping back to certificate authentication then, the beauty of that as well, as I'm sure you've all seen, I'm enrolled, I'm accessing Exchange. If I change my on-premise password, it's more than likely that my phone's going to continue to keep trying to authenticate against that password. And more often than not, this ends in a failed or locked out user account. Obviously with certificate authentication, because it's not using a password, we won't have that issue. So what I want to do is actually show you the sort of the process here, or let's actually show you how this looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to bring up my corporate phone for you to be able to see. I'm hoping technology is going to be on my side today. There we go. So as you see here, this is my phone. It's my corporate work phone. So what I'd like to do is just actually show you guys the experience about obviously what we've done and how I've given us as a business streamlined enrollment. Now, in order to be secure, I'm just going to minimize this slightly. I don't mind everyone seeing my email address, but I am going to hide my password. Perfect. So the Intune enrollment then. So if this is the first time also that you are looking at Intune, obviously you would have noticed there I've downloaded an app called the Company Portal. I've typed in my corporate credentials, as you can see here. We're taken through a wizard which explains to the user what we're looking to do and what, as an IT admin, we will be able to see. So I'll just give you a moment to just read that if you haven't seen it before. Technology is clearly not on my side today. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to disconnect from my Wi-Fi. Oh, timed out. Okay, that's fine. Let's just disconnect from the Wi-Fi. Let's try that again. Ray, and we're in. So we'll just open up the company portal. Obviously, the first thing it will do, we'll have a look to see if there is any policies or what policies it needs to push down. So just to make this quicker, I'm just going to sync to this device. So also note, if I just quickly jump back up to the top on this device, you can see this device is supervised and managed by PowerON platform. So when we talk about supervision, obviously this is one of the things that a user will see, but the device that I have here is also a supervised device. So we have our mobile device management solution. Now what I'm going to do, you can see here, it's automatically installing all of our line of business applications that we've picked for this profile. Now, if you've ever done this with a BYOD device, you will notice that it will actually pop up asking the user for their credentials, or well, let me rephrase that. It will actually pop up and say to the user, is it okay? Your business is trying to push these applications to you. Obviously, notice the experience on a corporate phone or a supervised device. It doesn't ask, it just does it. So it's very much a automated process. The user doesn't see it. It will obviously go ahead and it will install the app. So the user has enrolled, as you can see, and straight out that box, we've given them what they need to do their job. So while these obviously go ahead and continue to install, I'll actually show you what we've also done behind the scenes. So you see here we have 8 managed apps. So when we talk about MAM, these are the applications that are currently being enforced by MAM. So As you can see at the moment, they don't have a restrictive policy on. They are targeted with MAM, but they are not restricted at this time. We've not put a restrictive policy on. But let's take a look. So restrictions then. So at the moment, we are just enforcing a passcode now, because obviously I've got a passcode on my device that hasn't popped up and asked me to create one. But any restrictions that you have pushed down on the device or pushed to this device will appear in here. Now you can see what we've done straight from the MDM solution. I've published out all of our Wi-Fi networks. So our Wi-Fi networks have been pushed out with the security key. So what this allows me to do, I can then enroll. If I walk into one of our business offices, I'm automatically connected. You know, it doesn't prompt me. I don't have to go and connect to it and type the password. It knows that. So we've done that. Moving down, we can see that we have our root certificates. And you will also notice this certificate here, skip profile. So when we're talking about certificate authentication, this is what we're talking about. So what we've actually done here, you wouldn't have seen it because it would have actually happened in the background. So the device has been enrolled in Intune. Now in the background, whilst it's enrolled, it's basically gone to a web server. It's hit one of our web servers. It spoke to a service account. It's authenticated itself against our root certificate authorities. It's authenticated itself using the certificates, the authority certificates, and then on the fly it's actually generated itself a user certificate. So this is a very, very nice way of automating, you know, giving the device a certificate. So from there we can start to lock things down. You know, users enrolled in Intune, they've got their certificate, so we can start to use certificate authentication. So I can delve into this, as you can see here, the common name, Stewart McLaughlan, the time it was created, 10:31, and you can see here the email address is the subject alternative name. So I would love to show you certificate authentication, but that's probably going to be one for another day. Although if you can, certainly do, you know, if you are looking down that route, it is certainly worth it. So that's it from me. I hope that obviously that was beneficial. Obviously I have some pages you can go to. So we were talking about the deployment enrollment program for Apple. So you can find that at deploy.apple.com. A nice one also is the Intune user voice. So if you do find that Intune is missing a feature that was, you know, you used in another MDM solution, you can go to this website. Microsoft do listen, as you can see, user voice, 2 suggestions. So if there is enough votes for that, then they will look to implement it.